Lin Jing never thought that he would be in a ruined archaeological scene and into a completely beyond the usual trouble. It was an ordinary Saturday. As a graduate student in the history department, he followed the instructor to a remote mountain to participate in an emergency excavation. It is said that when local farmers were digging the foundation, they accidentally dug out a pile of blue copper debris, which was set as the war period in the early days. Lin Jing was not very interested in these things, but his goal of studying was very practical: to have a mixed study and find a stable literary job, just live. But the instructor pulled him excitedly, saying that this time he discovered that it might be a big breakthrough and insisted on him to come and see him. The scene is terrible, with the smell of earth mixed with sweat, and several workers are still carefully cleaning the soil with iron. Lin Jing squatted on the side, holding a small brush in his hand, and boredly brushing a piece of blue copper plate that had just been unearthed. The thing looks nothing special. It is pitiful on the surface, carved with some incomprehensible patterns, and the edges are still halfway. He wiped the mud on it with his hands, but unexpectedly, his fingertips suddenly pricked, and a small hole was opened in his palm, and blood fell on the green copper plate. Hiss, what a broken thing is so powerful! He murmured in a low voice, preparing to return the fragments to the mound. But at this moment, something strange happened. The blue copper sheet seemed to be activated, and the traces on the surface suddenly lit up a faint blue light, which was faint and dazzling. Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, and without reacting, a low buzzing sound came to his ears, as if something was blowing up in his brain. The next second, the world changed. He no longer squatted in the mud, and the surrounding archaeological teams, workers, and even the mountain was no longer visible. Instead, it was a dim sky, with a hard yellow dirt road under the feet. There were a few low dirt walls and houses far away, and the air was filled with the smell of burning firewood. Lin Jing looked down and found that what he was wearing was not just a sling and denim pants, but a long coarse cloth shirt with a thorny belt around his waist and a pair of straw sandals on his feet, releasing himself like an ancient farmer. Is this a dream? He pinched his thighs, and he was so painful that he was so excited. Not a dream. The group in his brain was irritating and he couldn't figure it out at all. He just wanted to ask someone, but he heard a hurried sound of horse hoofs coming from afar. Looking at it, I saw a team of soldiers wearing simple armor riding horses. The face full of flesh on their heads was still shouting in their mouths. It sounded like some ancient language, but Lin Jing could actually understand most of it. Quick! There is that village ahead, don't let anyone run away. Lin Jing felt nervous. Although he didn't know who they were talking, he just told himself not to stand here as a target. He turned around and ran towards the path next to him, but without running for a few steps, he roared angrily, "Stop! Run again, I will shoot you with one arrow." Before he finished speaking, an arrow swooshed against his shoulder and flew over, piercing into the soil next to him, and his feather tail was still moving slightly. Lin Jing was so scared that his legs were soft, so he dared not run away. He quickly raised his hands and shouted, "Don't shoot. I'm not a bad person." But the soldiers didn't hear it at all. They jumped off and rushed over, pressed him to the ground roughly, tied him up, and sniffed in his mouth, "Stop talking, take it back for review. Look at you, who is so tender and tender, you are probably a spy." Lin Jing was buzzing and was completely unsure of why he became a spy. He was dragged for a while and finally threw himself into a broken wood room, with a door banged closed, and a lock was on the outside. He sat on the ground, his whole heart was asking, "What's going on? Traveling through time? Or something accusation program?" But the eyes and murderous aura of those soldiers didn't seem to be acting no matter how they looked. Just as he was thinking about it, a slight response suddenly came from the corner of the woodshed. Lin Jing was startled and looked closely and realized that there was a man squatting there, a man in a long gray robe with white face and tight eyebrows, as if he was injured. He saw Lin Jing come and said in a low voice, "Don't make a sound, they're still outside." Lin Jing's soft voice was low and asked, "Who are you? Who is this?" The man glanced at him, his language was a little impatient, "It doesn't matter who I am. Are you new? You're so confused, I probably haven't figured out the situation yet. This is a small village in the vicinity of China. It's the war period now, and I don't know which year it's because time is unintentional. Warring the country? Is the time meaningless? Lin Jing felt that his brain was about to explode. Don't joke with me. I'm just a student. How could it be that the country could come? The man sneered. Student? Then you are so unlucky. My name is Qin Zhao, so I'm just a sage. Like you, I shouldn't be here, but there are some things that you can't decide whether you want or not. You'd better accept the reality quickly, otherwise you won't even remember who you were when you reset it next time. Reset? What is reset? Lin Jing became more and more confused as he heard it, but Qin Zhao didn't explain it anymore, but just closed his eyes and leaned against the wall, as if he was paying attention to him. Lin Jing was also trying to ask, but suddenly there was a sound of footsteps outside the door, and then the door was kicked open. Several soldiers walked in and pointed at Qin Zhao and said, "It's him. Lord, take him to ask." When Qin Zhao was dragged away, he was helpless in his eyes. Before leaving, he lowered his voice to Lin Jing, "Remember, don't let me die within 3 days, otherwise you don't want to live." This made Lin Jing feel a little nervous, but he didn't have time to ask clearly. The door was closed many times, and he was the only one left in the woodshed. Within 3 days? Don't let him die. What's all about this? Lin Jing sat down against the wall, and his brain formed a group. He tried to recall everything that happened just now, from the archaeological scene to the blue copper film, to the sudden appearance here. Everything was as unreal as dreaming. But the red marks on his wrists and the pain of the straw sandals on his feet all reminded him that this is not a dream. Just as he was in a daze, the window in the woodshed was suddenly knocked lightly. He looked up and saw a figure standing outside the window, wearing a black cloak, his face covered with a hood, and he couldn't see the appearance clearly. The man's voice was very light, with a little feminine gentleness. "Don't make a sound, I'll help you." Lin Jing was stunned for a moment, but without reacting, the man had already used something to pry the wooden bars of the window and jumped in neatly. She took off her hood and showed a pretty face, her eyes so bright that it could see through people's hearts. She glanced at Lin Jing and said calmly, "Your name is Lin Jing, right?" "My name is Bianli, from a place you don't need to know at the moment. I know you have a lot of questions, but now it's not a time for chatting. Follow me or you will die here." "How do you know my name?" Lin Jing asked in a question, but Jianli didn't have the chance to ask him at all, so she pulled him out of the window. It was already dark outside, and the village was quiet and there were only a few patrol soldiers wandering away. Jianli took him through several paths and hid in a deserted thatched hut before stopping. "Speak, I'll say it shortly." Bianli's low voice was clamoring, and his voice was rushing. "You are now trapped in a time cycle, which is a period of wartime. The specific incident was Qin Zhao's assassination. You have 3 days to stop this from happening, otherwise the time will reset, and you will return to the moment you were caught and resurrect everything. But worse, each reset, your memory will be damaged until you completely forget who you are." Lin Qing was stunned when he heard this, and after a long time he put it in a sentence, "Time circulates? This sounds like a science fiction novel. I am an ordinary person, how could I get involved in this?" Jianli looked at him, with a complicated look in his eyes. "An average person? Maybe. But if you can stand here, it means you are not ordinary. That piece of copper is a touching device, which pulls you into this stage. As for why it is you, I don't have time to explain it now. You just need to know that Qin Zhao can't die. If he dies, this cycle will be worse, and I can't even help you. Then what should I do?" Lin Jing felt as if she was listening to a book, but she told him that the woman named Jianli was not joking. Finding the person who assassinated Qin Zhao and stop him. Jianli said simply, but there was a slight hesitation in his eyes. "But I have to remind you that every action here will cause a correction countermeasure. The more you change, the stronger the countermeasures will be, and may even make you doubt your existence. So, don't trust anyone, including me." "Repair power? What is that?" Lin Jing heard the more he felt, the more confused he was. But Li didn't explain it anymore, but just took out a knife from him and stuffed it to him. Hold yourself and don't ask too much. Tomorrow morning, Qin Zhao will be taken to a camp outside the village. You have to find a way to get in and don't let something happen to him. I will help you in secret, but don't expect me to appear at any time. After saying that, Qianli turned around and left, leaving Lin Jing alone in the thatched hut. All his brains were asking. He looked down at the knife in his hand, and the blade reflected his blank face. All of this was ridiculous: time circulating, killing, correction power. He even began to doubt whether he was mentally ill. But the cold mud under his feet and the weight of the knife in his hand forced him to accept that all this might be true. It was getting brighter and there was a voice in the village. Lin Jing took a deep breath and decided that no matter whether this was a dream or a reality, he had to survive first. He hid the knife in his sleeve, walked out of the thatched hut carefully, and touched the place where he was said by Ji. On the way, he heard several villagers talking in a low voice, saying that they had arrested a sergeant yesterday, and they heard that it was a detailed work sent by the state, and they were to be taken to the military for review today. Lin Jing felt nervous and knew that they were talking about Qin Zhao. The site is not far away from the village, built on an open space, surrounded by wooden sticks and hemp trees. The guarding is not serious, but for people like Lin Jing, it is not easy to get in. He hid in the tree far away, observed for a while, and found that there would be a few minutes of space when the shift was being switched. He gritted his teeth and took advantage of a guard to turn around. The cat ran over the waist, overturned the wooden pavilion, and hid in the broken tent. There were only a few grass slabs in the tent, and there was a musty smell in the air. Lin Jingzhang just relaxed and heard a noise coming from outside, followed by heavy footsteps. He looked out from the gap in the tent, and saw only a few soldiers escorting one person away. It was Qin Zhao. His face turned worse, and blood was still hanging on the corners of his mouth, and he was obviously beaten hard. Lin Qing's heart sank and he held the knife in his sleeve tightly. He didn't know what he could do, but he remembered that the words of Li and Qin Zhao could not be allowed to die within 3 days. But how could he, a student who had no power to reduce his power, fight against these soldiers? Just as he was hesitating, a sharp whistle suddenly came from a distance, followed by horse hooves and shouts, as if someone had attacked the camp. The soldiers instantly formed a group, some shouting evil and some pulled out their swords and rushed out. Lin Jing took the trouble and sneaked out of the tent and ran towards Qin Zhao. He saw Qin Zhao being escorted by 2 soldiers and was about to retreat behind, but at this moment, a black shadow suddenly burst out from the side, and a cold light in his hand pierced Qin Zhao's chest. Lin Jing felt excited and didn't know where the courage came from, so he shouted, "Be careful." At the same time, he swept over and tried to catch that. But he was one step slower, and the dagger still stabbed into Qin Zhao's body, and the blood instantly dyed his clothes. Qin Zhao snorted and fell to the ground, his eyes filled with shock and reluctance. "No!" Lin Jing shouted, but the next second, he felt dizzy and the low buzzing sound came to his ears again. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that he had returned to the dirt road, and there was still the dim sky around him, and there were still 2 broken straw sandals under his feet. Far away, the sound of horse hooves rose again, and the soldiers on the head began to shout again, "Hurry! There is that village ahead, don't let people run away." Lin Jing stood there in a daze, and a strong fear surged in his heart. He finally understood what reset meant by Li. Time really went back, and he returned to the beginning. And Qin Zhao, who was just lying in front of him, was about to die again. He clenched his fists tightly, and there was only one thought in his brain: this time, he would never let Qin Zhao die. He didn't know why he was rolled into the circle, nor did he know what Jianli and the so-called correction force were, but he knew that if he didn't change what he might never escape the prison of this time. Lin Jing stood on the yellow dirt road, the sound of horse hooves in his ears getting closer and closer, and his heart was heavier than when it was reset just now. This is not the first time he has experienced this moment. Although his memory is a little blurry, the picture of Qin Zhao lying in a pool of blood is carved into his brain like a knife. He knew that if he failed again this time, the time would be back and everything would have to come back again. but the problem is that he didn't know what to do to stop the murder. "Don't be stunned, run." A familiar voice suddenly sounded from the side. Lin Jing turned around and saw that it was indeed Bianli. She was still in that black cloak, her face was cold and as if she had expected it. Lin Jing didn't ask much, just clicked the head and followed her quickly into the bushes along the way. The horse hooves shouted from them, and the soldiers did not notice this and continued to rush towards the village. Hiding in the bush, Lin Jing gasped and asked in a low voice, "Why did you appear again? Didn't you say you would help me any time last time?" Jianli glanced at him, with a little impatient speech. "I said I would help you in secret, but I didn't say I would keep watching you die. You just did that time, and you dared to push it directly without even the most basic observation. What happened?" Qin Zhao was still dead, and the time was reset. Lin Jing's face was red when she said it, but she felt really frustrated. How can I understand these things? I am just a student and not an agent, how can I know how to save someone? Besides, the assassin appeared too suddenly, and I couldn't react at all. Jianli snorted coldly, took out a rough cloth from his cloak with some simple terrain pictures. "Stop making excuses. Do you think the time cycle is for you to play with? Every time you reset, your memory will be damaged, and the longer you drag it, the more you will remember who you are. Don't get up. I heard that this is the map of the camp. I have drawn it very simply, but you have used it. Qin Zhao will be taken to the top of the middle, and the assassin will dive in from the small path behind. You have to find a way to block that road in advance, or at least let Qin Zhao avoid the first strike of the assassin." Lin Jing took the cloth and looked down at the crooked lines on it, and still felt a little bit in his heart. But why do I get stuck alone? I can't beat those soldiers, let alone as an assassin. Also, what is the correction force you were talking about? Why do I feel very different from the opposite side, like someone is in the brain? Li was silent for a while, her eyes flashed with a complex emotion, as if she wanted to tell him more. Finally, she opened her mouth and her voice was very low. "The correction force is the guardian of time. To put it simply, it does not allow anyone to change history. Every time you try to interfere with Qin Zhao's fate, you will be able to strike its counterattack. It may be a disaster, a human being, or your own inner demon. It will not kill you directly, but it will make you feel that everything is a pupil, and even make you doubt your own meaning." Lin Jing felt a little excited and couldn't help asking, "What about you? Why can you help me? Are you not afraid of this correction force?" Li's face became colder, and she turned over and avoided his visual line. "Don't worry about my affairs. You just need to know that I have my reasons. As for the correction power, it is a bit jealous of me, but that doesn't mean I can interfere at will. You have to rely on yourself, otherwise even if I help you 100 times, you can't escape this cycle." Lin Jing was still trying to ask, but Jianli had already stood up and patted the soil on her body. "Don't waste time. Go to the campsite, remember the route on the map, and don't be stupid again. I will be nearby, but don't expect me to save you anytime." After saying that, she turned around and left, and her figure quickly disappeared deep into the bush. Lin Jing held the rough map and gritted her teeth. Although she was still in her heart, she had at least a little more direction than she had just done. He knew that time would not wait for anyone, and within 3 days, he would find the assassin to prevent Qin Zhao from being killed. Otherwise, it is not only Qin Zhao's life, but his own existence may also be slowly worn down. It was getting dark and the voices of the people around the village were calm. Lin Jing carefully followed the route on the map and walked over the village carefully and touched the direction of the camp. On the way, his brain kept recalling the details of the last failure. Although his memory was a little blurry, he conceived that the assassin appeared from behind the site and was very fast, as if he had planned everything long ago. If you can block that road ahead of time, there may be a chance. The campground is still the same, with a few guards patrolling listlessly. Lin Jing hid in the tree far away, observed for a while, and found that the gap between the shift was still the same. He took advantage of the moment of guarding his way around and ran over the wooden pavilion, and hid in a broken tent. Everything was almost the same as last time, but this time he felt more vigilant. There was still the musty smell in the tent. Lin Qing squatted in the corner and looked out from the gap. Sure enough, he saw several soldiers walking towards Qin Zhao's large tent in the middle. Qin Zhao's face was still so bad, with blood on the corners of his mouth, and his eyes were filled with fatigue and reluctance. Lin Jing held the knife tightly in her sleeve and silently recited in her heart, "I will never let him die this time." He remembered the path behind the map and decided to go there first to see if the assassin could be blocked. While Shogun was not paying attention, he slipped out from behind the tent, circled a lot, and finally found the hidden path. The road is covered with grass on both sides, and it is indeed a good place to sneak through. Lin Jing squatted on the road, his heart beating fast, and his brain was full of various possible situations. If the assassin comes, what should he do? Poke with a knife? Or shouting to attract Shogun? But what if you do what you do if you treat him as an enemy first? Just as Uxi's mind was thinking, a slight sound of footsteps suddenly came from afar. Lin Qing held her breath and shrank into the grassland. Looking out through the gap, she saw a black shadow slowly approaching. The man was wearing a black night-mounted dress, covered with cloth on his face, and holding a dagger in his hand. His movements were as light as a cat, and it was obviously the one who stabbed Qin Zhao last time. Lin Qing felt tight in her heart, and her palms were covered in sweat. He knew he was not a match, but if he didn't do anything now, Qin Zhao would still die. He gritted his teeth, held the knife tightly, and decided to delay at least for a while. He quietly lifted a piece of stone beside his foot, threw it hard towards the other end of the path, and made a sound. The black shadow was indeed attracted by the attention, stopped and looked in the direction of the sound. Taking advantage of this gap, Lin Jing rushed out of Chao Rui and shouted, "Someone steals!" At the same time, he rushed towards the dark shadow. He had no hope of winning, he just wanted to hold on to the other side and let the guards of the camp hear the silence. But the shadow reacted very quickly and turned around and kicked Lin Jing into the chest, kicking him to the ground. Lin Jing could only feel her chest sank, and she couldn't breathe in pain, and the knife in her hand fell off. Looking for death. The black shadow coldly spit out 2 words, and as soon as the dagger flashed, he was about to plant to Lin Qing's neck. But at this moment, a rapid pace suddenly echoed from afar, and several guards shouted, "Who is it?" and rushed over. The black shadow snarled his eyebrows, obviously not willing to fight, and quickly turned around and dashed into the grassland, disappearing. Lin Jing was lying on the ground, her chest still hurt, but her heart relaxed. At least this time, he held the assassin and Qin Zhao was safe at the moment. But after Shouwei came, he did not give him a good face and directly called him a suspicious person and took him to the tent. In the tent, Qin Zhao sat on the ground with a snail on his body. When he saw Lin Jing being escorted in, there was a slightest look in his eyes. "It's you again? Why are you here?" Lin Jing smiled bitterly and said, "I don't want to be here either, but I have to save you, otherwise we will all be done." Qin Zhao glanced at the eyebrows, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he closed his mouth. The soldier who was escorting him came in and said impatiently, "Don't waste your time." This kid was sneaking in the back door, probably his careful companion. "Come on, take them together to the back camp, and wait for the adults to fall." Lin Jing's heart sank, knowing that it was so irritating. He tried to explain the picture, but the soldiers didn't hear it at all, and pushed them rudely and rushed backwards. On the way, Lin Jing said to Qin Zhao in a low voice, "I heard that someone is going to kill you. I just stayed there once, but they will come again. You have to help me, we have to find a way to escape." Qin Zhao glanced at him, and there was a little more exploration in his eyes. "Who are you? Why do you want to help me?" Lin Jing hesitated for a moment, but still didn't say anything. I'm just a passerby and accidentally rolled in. But I know that if you die, I can't be fine. So we have to cooperate." Qin Zhao didn't ask again, but just pointed it a little, as if he had reluctantly accepted this statement. The back camp is a more broken place with less protection, but the surrounding area is full of open space, and there is no place to hide if you want to run away. Lin Jing felt sad, and her brain kept thinking about solutions, but the more she thought about it, the less hope she felt. At this moment, the sky suddenly darkened, and a deep thunder sound came from afar, as if the storm was coming. "Why does this weather change?" a guard muttered, obviously not taking this seriously. But Lin Qing was inexplicably nervous, and she always felt that the thunder sound was too coincidental, as if someone had arranged it on purpose. He felt more and more restless when he remembered the correction power of Jianli. Sure enough, it took not long before the thunder sounded more and more, accompanied by a crazier wind, and the rain fell down. The guards were looking for a place to hide from the rain, and the guards who were running suddenly relaxed a lot. Lin Jing took the opportunity to low voice and said to Qin Zhao, "This is an opportunity, we have to run." Qin Zhao pointed his head, and while a guard was holding his back against them, he pushed the snail hard and quickly rushed into the rain curtain. The rain hits the body with a bit cold and bone-black view, which is extremely low, but it also helps them cover up their journey. Lin Jing ran out of the camp with Qin Zhao Chao, and became more and more uneasy. He always felt that the sudden heavy rain was not a coincidence, but the correction force was warning him and even forcing him to give up. After running for a while, the two finally hid in a forest and quickly got rid of the pursuers. Qin Zhao was breathing on a tree, his face was astonishing as he looked white, and he was obviously not very injured. He glanced at Lin Jing and said in a low voice, "Thank you. But I have to remind you that escaping does not mean safety. Those people will not let me go. If you help me, they will also be targeted by them." Lin Jing smiled bitterly. "I have been targeted for a long time, it's not a short time. Do you know who is going to kill you? What are the traces?" Qin Zhao was silent for a while before speaking. "I am just a young man and have no background. But recently I heard that someone doesn't want me to bring some news back to Chigua. I don't know who it is. I only know that they are very skilled and have their people in the army." Lin Jing felt a slump in his heart, and felt that this was more complicated than he had imagined. He was about to ask again, but suddenly there was a rapid sound of footsteps coming from afar, as if someone had caught up with him. He and Qin Zhao looked at each other and quickly hid in the deep forest. But at this moment, a cold voice echoed from behind, "I ran quite fast, but unfortunately, I still can't escape." Lin Jing turned around and saw a black shadow standing far away, with a strange breath emitting from her body, as if she had completely merged into this darkness. He didn't hold a weapon in his hand, but his eyes were creepy. Lin Jing was shocked and thought that this person was not an ordinary assassin, but the executor of the correction power said by Li. "Who are you?" Lin Jing insisted on the deck, pressing in front of Qin Zhao, but the sound was still trembling. The black shadow sneered, and his voice was as low as it was coming from the underground. "I am Shadow Blade, the cleaner of the timeline. You shouldn't be here, let alone interfere with his fate. I can let you die happily after handing over Qin Zhao." Lin Qing felt a moment in his heart and knew that he was really in trouble this time. He clenched his fists and turned quickly in his brain, trying to find out how to remove himself. But the Shadow Blade didn't give him too much time, and he walked towards them slowly. Every step seemed to be carrying some kind of pressure, making people breathless. At this moment, a familiar figure suddenly emerged from the side and slammed between Lin Jing and Shadow Blade. Li's voice was as cold as ice. "Shadow Blade, you crossed the line. You don't care about the matter here, just go back." Shadow Blade stopped and saw a jealous look in his eyes. "Jianli, you are indeed here. How long do you think you can protect them? The will to correct ones cannot be resisted, and you are no exception." Jianli sneered, "Then try it. I want to see it. It's your knife that is fast, or my tricks are strong." The two of them confronted each other, and the atmosphere seemed to explode at any time. Lin Jing took the opportunity to pull Qin Zhao back, feeling full of doubts. What is the relationship between Glass and Shadow Blade? Why is Shadow Blade so jealous of her? Also, when Li said that she was from the future, what is her real purpose? These problems were like a group of irritating things, making him feel more and more painful the more he thought about it. The rain was still falling, and the atmosphere in the forest became more and more strange. Lin Jing knew that the confrontation would not last for too long. Regardless of the result, his and Qin Zhao's fate was still in midair. He clenched his teeth and swore in his heart that no matter how many difficulties there were, he would survive and find a way to break this cycle. The rain pierced down like a knife, and the soil in the forest was trampled into a mud, and the air was filled with a cold chill. Lin Jing held his fist tightly, squatted beside Qin Zhao, staring at Jianli and Shadow Blade that were confronting each other far away. The atmosphere between the two people is like a tight bowstring, which may break at any time and an unpredictable conflict breaks out. His heart was beating fast, and his brain was full of mischievous thoughts. Who was Jianli? Why can she make a cold-blooded executor like Shadow Blade show a jealous look? Also, where's the end of this cycle? Shadow Blade's voice was low and cold, like a venom rolled out from the darkness. Li, do you know what you are doing? You can't escape punishment by resisting the will to correct the power. What do you think can change by protecting these two different transformers? The trance of history has long been destined, and no one can reverse it. Jianli stood in the rain, her black cloak was soaked, and the silk had no intention of retracting. She sneered, with disdain in her voice, destined? Shadow Blade, you are just being slapped by the time administration as a tool. Do you really think you are maintaining something great? Don't be naive, you are just their knife and can be abandoned at any time. This seemed to touch the Shadow Blade's counterattack, and his eyes suddenly became even colder, and his body shook slightly, as if he was ready to take action at any time. But he finally didn't move, just stared at Jianli and said in a low voice, "It's useless to be hard-mouthed, Jianli. You know my bottom line, and you know why I'm merciful to your subordinates. But that doesn't mean I will keep holding on. Hand them over, otherwise, I don't mind making you a foul on the timeline." Lin Jing felt nervous. Although he didn't understand the grudges between them very much, he could feel that the confrontation might be out of control at any time. He said to Qin Zhao in a low voice, "We can't sit and wait. We can run deep into the forest while they are not paying attention. We can drag it out if we can." Qin Zhao's face turned pale, and it was obvious that he was not very injured, but he still gritted his teeth and replied lightly, "Okay, but you have to know that this rain is not a coincidence. The corrective force is forcing us to run away." Lin Qing's heart sank, knowing that Qin Zhao said it was right. The sudden heavy rain and the appearance of the Shadow Blade all seemed like carefully designed traps, forcing them to have no way to go. But he had no choice but to pull Qin Zhao up with his head and take advantage of the fact that Jianli and Shadow Blade were still confronting each other, and quietly moved to the deep forest. They stepped carefully every step, and the muddy ground made them as slow as cows. The rain hit their bodies, and the ice hurt. But they didn't run far away, and Shadow Blade's voice sounded again, mocking with a slight silence, "Want to run? Change, do you think you can escape from the palm of your time?" Before the words finished, Lin Jing felt a slight on his back, as if he was locked by something invisible. He turned suddenly, not seeing anything, only the figure of Shadow Blade in the rain seemed to be hidden, approaching like a ghost. "Be careful!" Bing Li shouted loudly, his figure flashed, and he pressed in front of Lin Jing and Qin Zhao. There was a short blade in her hand, and a cold light was shining on her blade, as if it could tear the air apart. She slammed out with a knife, and a sharp collision sound came from the rain, like a metallic attack. Lin Jing saw clearly that the Shadow Blade had approached at some point. The invisible blade in his hand was about to pierce his chest, but it was slapped by Jianli. "Run! Don't turn around!" Jianli gritted her teeth, and there was a hurricane in her voice. Lin Jing didn't dare to think too much, and pulled Qin Zhao to stumble and continued running. He could only hear a fierce fighting sound from behind him. With the sound of rain, it seemed as if the whole forest was shaking. They ran for a while, and their lungs seemed to be about to explode. Qin Zhao finally couldn't hold back, and he fell down his feet, kneeled in the mud, panting, saying, "No. I can't run anymore. You go, don't worry about me." Lin Jing stopped walking, wiped the rain from his face, and gritted his teeth and said, "Don't waste it. Jianli is still dragging the monster behind him. I can't kill you. I'm going to waste this trip." He forced Qin Zhao up and continued to walk forward half-draggedly, but his heart was getting more and more uneasy. The rain was getting heavier and heavier, and the road deep in the forest became more and more difficult to distinguish. The distance was still filled with Shadowblade's cold smile, as if he would catch up with him at any time. At this moment, Qin Zhao suddenly stopped, looked strange in his eyes, and said in a low voice, "Wait. I seem to have been here." He pointed to a twisted old tree in front, with some blurry symbols engraved on it, like some ancient tag. Lin Jingfeng looked closer and found that the symbols were somewhat similar to the traces on the blue copper sheet at the time, and his heart suddenly jumped. "What is this?" He turned around and asked Qin Zhao, but Qin Zhao's face turned even whiter, as if he had remembered something terrible. He murmured in a low voice, "This is the mark of the cracks. I have heard that there are cracks hidden in the days of time, which can break all the limits, but the price is too high." Lin Jing heard it and immediately remembered that Qianli once mentioned that the only way to break the cycle is to find the cracks in the time point. But she also said that the location of the crack will change every time it cycles, and the price of touching it may be that he cannot bear. He looked at the old tree, fighting between heaven and man in his brain, one by one, the hope of escaping from the cycle, and the other by the unknown fear. "What is the price?" He couldn't help asking, and a shiver was shaking in his voice. Qin Zhao glanced at him, his eyes chaotic. "I don't know what it is, but in the story, people who touch the cracks will be swallowed by time, and all the traces of existence will be erased. Are you sure you try?" Lin Jing bit her teeth tightly, and her heart seemed to be torn by two forces. Of course he was afraid that he would really disappear into the long river of time, just like Qin Zhao said. But he was even more afraid of being trapped in this circle. He watched Qin Zhao die again and again, and was played in his palm by the correction force again and again, until he even forgot who he was. He took a deep breath and finally made up his mind, "I don't have to choose. If I don't try, I will never go out. What about you? Do you want to have a good time with me?" Qin Zhao was silent for a moment, finally got a little bit, and smiled bitterly, "Okay. I have nothing to lose anyway. Come on, let's take a look together. Is this crack saving or deep clean?" The two of them held each other and walked towards the old tree. As they approached, the light of those symbols became brighter and brighter, as if they had come alive, emitting a strange blue light. Lin Jing stretched out his hand and touched the symbol on the tree with trembling. In an instant, a cold energy penetrated his body through his fingertips, as if he was about to tear his mind apart. He clenched his teeth, and a low buzzing sound came from his ears, exactly the same as the sound he heard when he was pulled in the circle. "Lin Jing, stop!" Jian Li's voice suddenly came from behind, carrying unprecedented anxiety. Lin Jing turned around and saw that she was covered in wounds and her cloak was torn to pieces. It seemed that the fight with Shadowblade was exhausted. She ran over and tried to stop him, but it was too late. The blue light burst into an instant, covering Lin Jing and Qin Zhao's shining. The surrounding rain curtain and tree forest seemed to be twisted and quickly collapsed into nothingness. Lin Jing only felt that his consciousness was torn to pieces, and countless pictures flashed through his brain: blue copper films and archaeological scenes, yellow dirt roads and the war villages, Qin Zhao's eyes lying in a pool of blood, and Jianli's complicated and indistinguishable face. These pictures flew past like walking on a horselight, and finally frozen at the moment when he first touched the copper film. He heard a low voice rumbling in his ears, like a murmur from the depths of time, "Difference, you choose to break the circle, but the price of freedom is something you cannot bear. Your existence will be rewritten." This made Lin Jing feel a little nervous, but he had no way out. The blue light became more and more dazzling. He closed his eyes and let the force swallow him. I don't know how long it took, but the consciousness finally regained his eyes. He suddenly opened his eyes and found that he was standing in a completely unfamiliar place. Under the feet is no longer a muddy forest, but a dry red soil, and a strong smell of sulfur is circulating in the air. On the far skyline, several huge stone statues stood, and the faces of the statues were blurred, emitting a disturbing sense of pressure. Lin Jing looked down and found that he was still wearing a long coarse cloth shirt, but Qin Zhao could no longer see it. There was only a piece of broken blue copper plate next to him, lying quietly on the ground, and the symbols on the surface were dim and vague. "Where is this?" he said in a low voice, and a strong sense of anxiety surged in his heart. He tried to recall what happened just now, but his memory seemed to be cut off by something, and he could only remember some fragments. He knew he had broken the circle, but why didn't he go back to reality and came to this strange place? At this moment, a familiar voice echoed from behind, carrying a burst of fatigue and helplessness. "Lin Jing, you did make this choice." He turned around and saw that Li was standing far away. Her face was pale, and her eyes were filled with complex emotions. Her cloak was so broken that it was not visible, and the short blade in her hand was no longer visible, as if she had just experienced a life-and-death struggle. Why are you here? Where's Qin Zhao?" Lin Jing asked quickly, with a hint of anxiety in his voice. Jianli slammed his head and smiled bitterly. "Qin Zhao will never come back. He is part of history. After the cycle is broken, his life has been reprinted into the timeline. As for whether to die or live, I don't know. And you should have returned to reality, but the time administration will never let the changers be so easy to remove. They threw you into another section, a more dangerous place." Lin Jing felt a sank in his heart, and couldn't help asking, "Time Management Bureau? What exactly are they? Why do you want this to me? I'm just an ordinary person." Jianli was silent for a while, as if he wanted to tell him the truth. Finally, she sighed and said in a low voice, "The Time Authority is the controller of time. They think they are guardians of order, but in fact, they just use time to achieve their goals. You are being rolled into the circle, not by chance, but by their experiments. They want to see how long an ordinary person can be in the prison of time and whether they can break the rules they set. And I was one of them, but now, I am their enemy." This was like a heavy blow on Lin Jing's heart. He stared at Jianli blankly, and after a long time he put it on, "Then are you helping me because, do you want to use me to deal with them?" Jianli didn't deny it, but said lightly, "Maybe. But I help you because I don't want to see someone like me being played in the hands of the time administration. Lin Jing, you have two choices now: to accept the reality and continue to slam in this new section until it is completely erased by the correction force, to work with me to find the weaknesses of the administration and destroy their games in full." Lin Jing felt a sudden surge in his heart. He never thought that he would be able to roll into such a big sacred person. He is just an ordinary student and just wants to live a simple life, but now, even this simple wish has become a luxury. He looked at the red soil under his feet, then at the strange stone statues far away, and finally clenched his teeth and said, "Okay, I'll be with you. But I have a condition: you have to tell me everything, including your past, and the real purpose of the time administration." Jianli clicked a little, and there was a hint of relief in his eyes. "Document. But I have to remind you that this path is more dangerous than you think. You may lose more, and even your last memory is damaged. Are you sure you want to go on?" Lin Jing took a deep breath and clenched his fists. "I have nothing to lose. Come on, tell me, where's this stage? What should we do next?" Li looked at him, and finally a hint of smile appeared on the corner of her mouth. "This is an older period than the war period, a civilization that has been forgotten by history. They tried to challenge the rules of the battle time, but they were wiped out by the administration. Our mission is to find the escape they left behind, which may contain the keys to the administration. But be careful, the correction power here is 100 times stronger than before, and I can't even guarantee that I can escape unstoppable." Lin Jing pointed a little, but although he was still not at a loss, he had at least one more direction than he had just done. He followed Jianli and walked towards the stone statue far away. His steps were heavy, and he was carrying a desperate decision. The wind on the red soil became bigger and bigger, making people almost confused, but he knew that the resistance just began. No matter what is waiting for him ahead, he will not retreat. A dark red light rose from the far away, like a call from some unknown force. Lin Jing looked at the light and felt an inexplicable premonition in his heart. The secrets hidden in this land were much deeper than he imagined. And his journey with Li will definitely not have a simple ending.